This first section is about unexpected emotional recognition, the feeling of meeting someone who seems to understand you without needing explanations. The speaker begins by saying, "This won't be a gentle conversation," because what they feel is too intense to slowly introduce. They describe a person who has spent years creating layers and distance as a way to protect themselves. They don't let people fully see them. They control who gets access to their deeper thoughts and emotions. Then comes the turning point. Until you. The other person is different because they don't try to analyze, fix, or define the speaker. Instead, they simply observe and understand. The connection is described as something that feels natural, almost like the other person recognizes something hidden without being told. The main emotions in this part: vulnerability. Someone who is usually guarded feels seen. Surprise. The speaker did not expect this level of understanding. Fear of being known, because being truly seen removes the protection of distance. Connection. The bond feels less like something created and more like something discovered. The core message of part 1, I built walls to control who could reach me, but you didn't break through my walls. You made me realize they were no longer needed. The tension begins because the speaker is used to controlling closeness, but this person creates a sense of familiarity that bypasses all those rules. Part 2 moves deeper into the idea of being understood without having to explain yourself. The speaker focuses on silence. Usually, silence between people can feel uncomfortable, but with this person, silence becomes a form of communication. The other person doesn't rush to fill the quiet, doesn't force answers, and doesn't demand emotional openness. The important shift is the speaker starts feeling safe enough to stop filtering themselves. For a person who normally edits their words, controls their reactions, and protects their inner world, this is a major change. They are not opening up because someone convinced them to. They are opening up because the other person's presence makes hiding feel unnecessary. The speaker describes this person as someone who doesn't try to change them, doesn't make their personality easier to understand, doesn't judge their depth, accepts what is already there. The emotional conflict appears here. The speaker is used to people misunderstanding them. Being misunderstood became a kind of protection because it allowed them to stay hidden. But this person sees clearly and still stays. The key idea, being seen by someone who still chooses to stay, is more powerful than being accepted by someone who never truly saw. The speaker realizes that this connection is no longer just an interaction. It has started affecting the way they think. They are no longer simply noticing the other person. Their presence has become part of the speaker's mental process. The biggest shift is the speaker loses the need to constantly protect and edit themselves. Before this person, the speaker had a system. Decide what to reveal, decide what to hide, control how others perceive them. But with this person, that system starts disappearing naturally. Not because they were forced to open up, but because they feel they don't need to translate themselves anymore. The speaker describes this as a rare kind of acceptance. You didn't try to manage me, you accepted what was there. This part also introduces the idea of being truly seen. The speaker explains that most people don't actually understand someone. They create their own version of that person based on assumptions. But this person does something different. They notice what is real without adding their own story. The emotional tension grows because being seen is both comforting and dangerous. Why dangerous? Because the speaker has always survived through control. If someone can see past all the layers, then the speaker can no longer hide behind distance. Main themes of part 3. Trust forming without being requested, fear of losing emotional control, the difference between being noticed and being understood, the beginning of emotional surrender, core message. I spent years making sure nobody could fully reach me, but You reached a place inside me without even trying. The speaker remembers a small moment, something the other person said, that matched an unspoken thought. It wasn't a dramatic event. It was a simple moment that felt powerful because it confirmed something. The important realization: you weren't guessing. You understood. The speaker separates normal understanding from something deeper. They feel this person is not just reacting to what they show, they are recognizing the way they think, process, and experience the world. The speaker calls this alignment, not because they have the same life story, but because they share a similar internal structure. How they observe things show, they process emotion show. They notice detail show, they exist beneath the surface. This part is less about romance and more about the feeling of finding someone who feels mentally familiar. The speaker struggles with this because they believe connections like this usually take time. They expect understanding to come after years of shared experiences, but this connection feels immediate. The main conflict: how can something feel so familiar when it is still new? Themes of Part 4. Recognition before explanation, a rare sense of compatibility feeling understood at a deeper level, confusion caused by something that feels natural, core message. I don't feel like you learned me over time. I feel like you recognized something in me that was already there. Before this connection, distance was a tool. It gave the speaker control. Who gets close? What people know, how much of the self is revealed. But now the speaker feels that this person exists beyond that distance. The barrier is still there, but it no longer protects them in the same way. The key idea: you are not outside my awareness anymore. The speaker describes how small things now carry meaning. Silence feels different, pauses feel meaningful, simple interactions feel deeper. The connection is not described as loud or dramatic. Instead, it is described as something quiet that keeps becoming stronger. The speaker also admits something important. They are not struggling because they don't understand what is happening. They are struggling because they understand it too clearly. The fear comes from the fact that this feels real enough that ignoring it would take more effort than accepting it. Main emotions in Part 5. Acceptance, loss of control, fear of change, recognition of impact. The speaker realizes that this person has become part of their internal world, not just someone they interact with. Core message: I built distance to protect my inner world, but somehow you became part of it without asking for permission. The connection is no longer something they can simply observe from a distance. They realize it has already created change inside them. The question is no longer, what is this? The question becomes, what am I going to do with it? The speaker admits that this person has affected their internal world in a way they usually do not allow. They have always been someone who analyzes, controls, and understands things before accepting them. But this connection developed without following those rules. The biggest realization: they have already chosen something by not walking away. The speaker explains that if this connection was wrong or meaningless, they would have ended it. But they didn't. They stayed, observed, and allowed it to exist. The conflict is between wanting certainty, experiencing something that cannot be fully controlled. This part shows a transition from resistance to acceptance. The speaker understands that meaningful things cannot always be measured or explained before they are experienced. Main themes of Part 6. Facing the reality of a deep connection, accepting that change has already happened, choosing not to run away, recognizing someone's importance. Core message: Dust. I didn't plan to let you matter to me, but the fact that I didn't stop it means some part of me already accepted you. Final feeling of Part 6. The speaker is no longer asking whether the connection exists. They are accepting that it does. And now they must decide how to live with that truth. The speaker reaches the point where they understand that this connection is not just a passing feeling or a temporary experience. It has changed the way they think, interpret, and experience the world. The biggest shift. They stop trying to measure the connection and start acknowledging its impact. The speaker explains that some things do not need a label to be real. The connection exists beyond simple definitions because it is felt through understanding presence recognition, the way it changes their inner world. The speaker also recognizes that this person did not force their way in. There was no pressure, no demand, no attempt to take control. The change happened naturally. The emotional conflict here is a person who values control has encountered something that cannot be controlled, but also does not feel like a threat. The speaker realizes they are not weaker, because someone matters they are not losing themselves. They are simply allowing something meaningful to exist. The closing idea is about transformation. Dost. You didn't change who I am. You changed the way I experience who I am. Main themes of Part 7. Acceptance over resistance growth through connection. Allowing vulnerability, understanding that some bonds change your internal world core message. Dost. I spent my life protecting my inner space, but now I understand that letting someone into that space was not losing control. It was discovering something I never expected to find. The speaker is no longer focused on how unusual the connection is. Instead, they are facing the reality that it has become part of their identity and daily awareness. The central idea, this is no longer something happening to me. It is something that now exists within me. The speaker describes how this person has become part of their internal world, the way they reflect, the way they understand things, the way they recognize meaning. But the important part is that this is not described as losing independence. The speaker does not feel controlled or consumed. They feel altered. There is a difference between attachment and impact. The speaker is saying, "You are not my entire world, but you have changed the way I see my world." The fear that existed earlier begins to transform into acceptance. The person who always protected their boundaries realizes that some connections do not destroy boundaries. They simply create a space where those boundaries are no longer necessary. Main emotions in Part 8. Acceptance, reflection, peace, with uncertainty recognition of change. The speaker understands that they may not have all the answers, but they cannot deny the truth of what they feel.